Here's what's coming up on your horizon. Well, April 19th is a somber anniversary for Oklahomans, a day when so many lives were needlessly changed by a mass murderer. What the history books will tell you is on that day, an ordinary American disgruntled by the government detonated a rental truck packed with explosives in front of the federal building in Oklahoma City. 168 people died that day, 19 of those small children in a first-floor daycare. But the story, well, it doesn't end there. Today, we will focus on how survivors and families of victims have picked up the broken pieces of their lives and moved forward in the 20 years since April 19th, 1995. Stay with us for the special edition of Oklahoma Horizon.
Oklahoma Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. And now, from the Career Tech Studios in Stillwater, here's your host, Rob McClendon.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Oklahoma Horizon. Well, April 19th, 1995 is a date that for those of us in Oklahoma brings up similar feelings that 9/11 does for the country. But unlike 9/11, this was an attack not by some foreign agents, but by one of our own, shaking the very safety and security that you feel living here in the middle of America. Today, we take you back to the moments before the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building, to a time when we were all 20 years younger and still naive to the hatred that was about to strike the heartland. For Marine Captain Randy Norfleet and his wife Jamie, April 19, 1995 could not have started off better.
You thought it was your lucky day because you had just gotten a prime parking spot.
Yeah, and I thought it was my lucky day because it was about 9 o'clock in the morning and I had gotten a front row parking spot.
In downtown Oklahoma City, at the Murrah Federal Building,
I noticed this yellow Ryder truck in front of the Oklahoma City Federal Building. And I thought it was a little bit strange, but what was unusual to me is that they had parked it right in front of the red loading zone of the building. And that was just not military for a military person to park in a non-parking zone. So then this guy got out of the truck and he ran across the street.
Because inside sat a 5,000-pound fertilizer bomb, set to explode within minutes. Unaware, Norfleet heads up to the Marine recruiting station on the 6th floor.
I just walked straight into the operations office, and I ran into a young man, a young Marine, and his name was Sergeant Benjamin Davis.
An enlisted Marine who Norfleet had helped to take his boards to become an officer.
He was like, "Captain Norfleet, can you call Headquarters Marine Corps and find out if I was selected for this board?" And so I called and I got a busy signal. And I hung up the phone and I looked at Sergeant Davis and I said, "You know what, I'll come back in 5 minutes, right? Because, we all think we've got another 5 minutes." I walked into the next office over, which was our supply department. And the next thing I know, a big explosion goes off. The concussion of the bomb made my vision go out, but it didn't knock me unconscious. As the shrapnel started to hit me, I was able to throw my left arm in front of my left eye, which saved me and put shrapnel all through my arm. But I have a big piece of glass that came and it cut my forehead and lodged in my right eye. The glass facade of the building shattered first and came in first, but the explosion of the bomb shattered the support columns of the building, and so the building started to collapse on each other. And so as the 8th, 9th, and 7th floor hit the 6th floor, the impact of that threw me into the west wall of the Oklahoma City Federal Building. It left me unconscious, it fractured my skull and broke my nose, and I was left bleeding, what I found out later, with 2 open arteries there in the building. I'm not really sure how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, it was just, to me, it was deathly quiet. All I could hear were the fires of all the cars in the parking lot that were on fire, and off in the distance I could hear fire alarms going off. But there, where we were locally, it was just deathly quiet.
Everything and everyone from where Norfleet had just been moments before, now gone.
I just remember looking out over the building and seeing that clear Oklahoma sky, just right from the 6th floor.
Where there was building before.
Where there had been building before, yeah. It was just, I was just in shock and just trying to process all of the changes.
Back in their home in Stillwater, Randy's wife Jamie was unaware of the tragedy unfolding around her husband.
I was expecting our third child and a little girl, and
she was 7 months pregnant.
I was 7 months pregnant. The phone rang, and I picked it up. So we had a prayer chain that if something was going on or something, we would, start calling each other and telling Jamie, there's been an explosion in Oklahoma City, and so we just, we need to start, praying for those that are there in Oklahoma City that's been affected by it.
Side of the federal building has been blown off.
I turned the television on and could see immediately the building. I just dropped the phone and just dropped to my knees. And I knew he was there. And I just remember saying out loud, I said, God, I'll take him any way I can get him. I don't care how hurt he is or what happens, I'll take him.
Upstairs on what was left of the 6th floor of the Merrill Federal Building, a fellow Marine had moved Randy on top of a desk.
So he looked at me and he said, Captain Norfleet, you don't look good. And so he had been an infantry Marine with me there in Desert Storm. So immediately his Marine Corps training kicked in and he took charge. He was a Marine in charge. But while I was laying there on that desk with 2 open arteries and I was bleeding out like so many in that building did, I realized that if I stayed on this desk that I would die. I got up from the desk and really all I could see was, at this point, was just looking down below me. And what I saw was a bright red, when blood is still oxygenated, it's bright red. And so I followed that blood trail to the back of the building, and, it was just miracle of all miracles that the back stairs were intact. And so I walked down 6 flights of stairs, and I think I got into one of the first ambulances, and they took me to St. Anthony's Hospital, which was just 2 blocks away.
Word got out, and of course Randy's secretary there at the recruiting station here in Stillwater knew Randy's itinerary, and so she alerted the other Marines that were here, and they came to the house. But because, knowing some protocol, and Randy and I have lost some dear friends in the Marines. So I knew when the Marines, came to the door, and I told them, I said, you're not coming in. You don't come in here. Do not come in this house. So they were so precious because they literally started hollering out, Mrs. Norfleet, Mrs. Norfleet, we don't know anything. We're not here to tell you any news. We don't have any news yet. All communication is down right now with the phone systems there in that building. And so at that point, I opened them in and opened the door and let them in. And I was happy to see them because I was like, they weren't crossing that threshold until they said that they weren't coming to tell me bad news. I know that sounds a little strange, probably a little crazy, But it was almost like a defense mechanism, that it was like if I could keep them on the other side of that door, they couldn't tell me something I didn't want to hear.
Arriving at the hospital, critically injured, Captain Randy Norfleet went straight into triage.
When I checked in, my blood pressure was 50/0, and he said, if you hadn't have gotten to St. Anthony's in the time that you did, you probably would have been the 169th victim of the Oklahoma City Federal Building.
Yet, despite his condition, Randy had only one thing on his mind.
The nurse, the attending nurse there in surgery, I had made her write my phone number on her arm 3 times. And it was insistent that she get a hold of my wife and tell her where I was at.
I get a call, and they have found Randy. He is alive, and I just remember just being weak. I just thought I was going to collapse just with relief. And I remember feeling like I had won the lottery, just because, even though with the news of he's critical and he's had some severe injuries, it gave me hope.
Jamie headed to the hospital in record time, a journey that still haunts her today.
We passed by the building. I rolled that window down, and when I saw that building, I didn't know how anyone could live. A lot of people didn't live. And I think the worst, this is probably the hardest memory, one of the hardest memories I have. There were mothers lining the area in which they could be. And I can remember them, some of the children were being brought out. And they were beginning to lay them on the side of the sidewalk. But one of the moms called out and said, "Don't lay our babies on that glass."
Jamie made it through the traffic and the chaos surrounding the bombing site, determined to see her husband 2 blocks away.
I remember walking up to the front of St. Anthony's, and there were crowds of people. They had pictures of their loved ones.
Hoping against all hope for a miracle.
That's the thing on something like this, is the worst is not knowing and not being able to deal with what's happening, and not being able to find your loved one. And I remember thinking, I'm blessed to know that Randy is inside this hospital.
But that reunion was yet to be.
A nurse, as I'm waiting for an elevator, spots me and says, "Where might you be going?" And I said, I'm headed to see my husband. He was brought in from the building." And she said, "Are you, you look like you're in pain." I said, "Yeah, I think I've been having some contractions for a few hours, but I've got to go check on my husband." And she said, "Well, we will check on him, but let's go see about you first." So I got put into a wheelchair and got sent to labor and delivery.
They were able to stop the contractions with Jamie, and our daughter Morgan was born 2 months later at full term. And so we've always called her the bombing baby. And my little joke is that, dads rarely get any attention. And so this was my big day. I had been blown up, been injured, had all of this attention. And here my daughter is trying to take my day from me, right? And so fortunately, she was kind enough to have her own day and to let me have mine.
Which turned into months of recovery. Captain Randy Norfleet's injuries were severe. Now blind in his right eye, he never piloted a plane again. But rather than dwell on the past, the Norfleets looked to the future.
So at that time, you're in that part of your life where you're picking up the pieces, and you determine in your mind, am I going to be a victim and allow this tragedy to be a stumbling block to me, or am I going to overcome this tragedy that's been in my life and use it as a stepping stone to the next part of my life.
Fully aware that this was indeed his lucky day, with one less empty chair memorializing the victims of the bombing, and one more name on a wall of the survivors whose lives also changed on April 19th, 1995.
I probably do need to track him down.
Absolutely.
Well, the Oklahoma City National Memorial has been called hallowed ground. Located on the site of the bombing, what you'll find are two monuments facing each other. The first saying 901, the moment before the bombing, and the second 903, the moment after. And in between, 168 empty chairs for everyone that died that day. And that is where our Austin Moore picks up our story with the lives of family members who were forever and inextricably changed.
There is another memorial in Oklahoma City. Outside the headquarters of the Department of Ag, Food, and Forestry, a heart-shaped path, lined with stones from all 77 counties, surrounds a small grove of redbud trees. This to remember the ag workers lost in the 1995 bombing.
Peggy was my youngest daughter, and was always, from the time that she was 6 years old, she said she was going to be a veterinarian, and she never changed her mind. She was very active, and she went to 4-H, then of course into FFA, and showed cattle.
And eventually achieved her dream. Dr. Peggy Clark worked as a veterinary medical officer for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1995. She was on her way from her home in Chickasha to a meeting in Stillwater on April 19th, but had to make a stop at the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City. Peggy left 3 daughters at home that morning: Rosalind, Chelsea, and Blaine.
Memory I have of that day was that morning actually doing chores, which we did many times as a family, and we were kind of finishing up, and then she was headed out, and we, she was headed down the driveway, and we kind of waved and said, "We'll see you later."
We spoke with Peggy's oldest daughter, Rosalind Spencer Biggs, at the Oklahoma Youth Expo, an event reminiscent of the way her day started on April 19th, 1995.
On that day, actually, I was at an FFA event, an FFA judging contest, and our ag teachers told us, what had happened that morning, and tried to call through. The numbers weren't working, of course. And they quickly gathered everybody up and headed back to Chickasha.
From there, the waiting began. The family glued to media coverage, looking for signs of hope. Something they found in the footage of a close colleague being rescued.
We saw Dr. Espy, who was coming down the ladder, and so that gave us a lot of hope that if where he was in the building was safe, that she would be safe as well, but that was unfortunately not the case.
Peggy was in the lower floors at the time of the explosion.
It came to a point that we thought if she was, where you realize that it had been too many days probably for someone to still be alive, but it still took several weeks before they actually found her. So we had gone back to school and kind of started, because you didn't have much option. I mean, that's what you had to do.
So life moved on, but the void remained for these 3 young women.
She was very, very intelligent, very, very smart, very funny, would do anything in the world for us.
A void their father, David, worked hard to fill.
Our father did a great job raising 3 girls by himself. Now I look back and think, wow, what, he could be in the loony bin after raising 3 girls.
But he didn't do it alone. In the months and years that followed, the community huddled around this grieving family.
in our community there in Chickasha, or at church, in FFA, 4-H, everyone was always so kind and generous and willing to help, and that's what Oklahoma's about, and so that's a pretty impressive thing. And even now, when someone didn't know and they find that out, they said, I had no idea I would have done something. Which, that's just, people caring is a pretty amazing thing.
The agricultural community these young women had been raised in has proven to be a great source of strength.
We were very fortunate that my mother had encouraged us to be very independent and had involved us in a variety of activities, from 4-H and FFA to working with livestock. We showed horses, we showed cattle, so we kind of had that support team within the ag community, within those activities that we did, because those are the kind of people that bring food to your house and say, hey, we'll do chores, whatever you need, let us know, and they really mean it. They really will do anything that you ask them to do.
We still have their support today, and it's been fun to get reacquainted with lots of those folks as our kids are kind of starting back the next generation of agriculture in our family. This place is actually, here at the fairgrounds, has been very, very special to us. It's where we showed some of our first national horse shows. It was a time where we came together as a family, showing, and we showed lots of different types of animals, but really brought us together, and it was a real family activity and a family focus.
When I missed Peg the most was the special occasion. All of the girls were valedictorians in their classes. We've had the weddings and then the grandbabies, and that is when you miss her the most.
For me, having children has been a tough thing for not having my mom around. You want to say, well, what did I do at this age? When I was a toddler, or when did I get my teeth? Or, those moments that typically you would have never thought to ask those questions before you had kids.
I'm sorry that she missed out, because the girls have turned out so well. I'm sorry she missed, but I feel like that she instilled in them, even at their young age, she had given them the values to go on.
More than that, the girls have carried on her legacy. Chelsea, the youngest, is involved in agriculture in Kansas. Blaine is the Deputy Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of Oklahoma. And Rosalind has followed very literally in her mother's footsteps as a veterinary medical officer for the USDA.
It's been really an interesting opportunity for me to work with some of the same people that she'd worked with. And so not only do I know her from a my personal experiences, but through them I get to see what she was like professionally. And occasionally I get, that's something that your mother would have done, or something your mother would have said. So, and those are nice comments, definitely compliments in my book.
Daughters proudly serving the public as their mother did before them, but now acutely aware of the risks.
Once in a while, you kind of think about they were just going to work just like I do every day. Do you know what I mean? Just like all of us in this building, or so many state or federal employees do. But I think every once in a while, as my son gets older, I have 2 small kids, but he says, well, what if something bad happened to you? And those are tough. Those are really tough things to say. Well, you shouldn't worry about that.
20 years ago, our state and certainly our nation was changed forever. 168 lives were lost, 7 employees of the USDA were lost at the site. It was an attack that could have crippled our state, could have crippled our city, but it didn't.
This past spring, the Memorial Grove outside the Department of Ag, Food and Forestry was rededicated and a new whitebud tree added. A fitting tribute
to Peggy Clark, Olin Bloomer, Jim Bowles, Dick Cummins, Adele Higginbotham, Carol Khalil, and Retta Long,
who all here have their names etched in stone.
In visiting with families of victims and survivors of the bombing, I was struck by their forgiveness, because what they've learned is something Timothy McVeigh never knew, that hatred is an insidious emotion, destroying the person who hates as much as what is hated. Now, if you'd like to hear some true words of wisdom from those we talked to today, we have much more of their interviews streaming on our website. Just go to okhorizon.com and look under our value-added section. And finally today, outside my office, there's a tree, an oak, I believe, that now towers above the courtyard it was planted in 20 years ago by co-workers honoring the memory of those killed in the federal building bombing. A gentle reminder each spring as the first leaves begin to appear that to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven.